Captain Eric Johnson stood at the viewport of the Earth Coalition vessel Endeavour, his blue eyes fixed on the massive ship that waited ahead. It was unlike anything humans had ever built. The alien vessel stretched nearly 2 miles long, its hull shimmering with a material that seemed to both absorb and reflect light. The name Eternal Dawn was fitting for the flagship of an empire that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. 2 minutes until scheduled contact, Captain, said Dr. Allison Murphy, her voice steady despite the tension that filled the bridge. As science officer, she had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Humanity's first official meeting with the Galactic Empire. Eric nodded, straightening his uniform jacket. Lieutenant Garcia, status of our shields. Alan Garcia, the security chief, checked his console. Shields at full strength, Captain, though they wouldn't do much good if that thing decides to sneeze at us. Eric couldn't argue with that assessment. The Endeavour was Earth's most advanced ship, but next to the alien vessel, it looked like a rowboat beside an aircraft carrier. Opening communication channel, Allison said, her fingers moving across her screen. They're responding. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a being that looked almost human, yet not quite. Its skin had a pale, crystalline quality that caught the light and broke it into tiny rainbows. Its eyes were large and entirely silver, with no visible pupils. I am High Emissary Zorvex of the Galactic Empire, the alien said in perfect English. You have been granted the honor of official recognition by His Eternal Luminance, Emperor Thaxulo the Magnificent. Eric took a deep breath. High Emissary, I am Captain Eric Johnson of the Earth Coalition vessel Endeavour. On behalf of humanity, we welcome this opportunity for friendship and exchange. The alien's expression didn't change. It was like talking to a beautiful statue. Friendship is a concept for equals, Captain Johnson. The Empire does not have friends. It has subjects, it has protectorates, and it has enemies. Your species has been categorized as a developing protectorate, which grants you certain privileges and responsibilities. Helen tensed beside Eric, but the captain gave a small shake of his head. They had been warned this might happen. The Galatians were known for their directness and their belief in their own superiority. We understand, Eric said carefully. We look forward to learning about the privileges and responsibilities that come with protectorate status. 3 hours later, Eric sat with Allison and Alan in the ship's conference room, looking at the terms the Galatians had offered. The mood was somber. They're treating us like children, Alan said, pushing away the tablet in disgust. Limited travel rights, restricted trade, mandatory inspections of all our colonies. They even want to place observers on Earth. Allison sighed. We knew they'd see us as primitive. Their civilization is over 20,000 years old. They had faster-than-light travel when humans were still figuring out agriculture. Eric rubbed his tired eyes. The question is, do we have a choice? Our orders are to secure peaceful relations, not start an interstellar war we can't win. His communication device beeped. It was a message from Earth Command. Accept terms. Build relations. Learn their weaknesses. Plan accordingly. Eric looked up at his officers, his expression grim. It seems we're playing the long game. We accept their terms for now. A week later, Eric watched as the first Galatian delegation prepared to visit Earth. As the alien shuttle descended through the clouds above the United Nations headquarters in New York, he couldn't shake a feeling of unease. They looked down on us, Allison said quietly, standing beside him. Yes, Eric agreed. And throughout history, that kind of attitude has rarely ended well for either side. He didn't know it then, but his words would prove more prophetic than he could have imagined. The Galatians had indeed come in peace, but peace, as humanity would learn, meant something very different to an empire that had never known an equal. 5 years passed since the first meeting with the Galatians. Humanity had spread beyond Earth, establishing its first colony on a planet orbiting Proxima Centauri. They named it New Haven, a symbol of hope for the future. Governor Samantha Kelly stood on the balcony of the Colonial Administration Building, watching the settlers go about their daily lives. The dome above filtered the red light of Proxima Centauri into something closer to Earth's sunlight. Gardens grew between the buildings and children played in a park at the center of the colony. One boy ran faster than the others, his laughter carrying across the distance. Samantha smiled as she watched her son Danny. At 10 years old, he was the first human child born on another world. Many called him the face of humanity's future among the stars. "He's getting faster," said a voice beside her. Paul Kelly joined his wife at the railing, his engineer's uniform dusty from the day's work on the colony's power systems. "Too fast," Samantha replied. "He'll be a teenager before we know it." Paul's smile faded. "The Galatian inspection team arrives tomorrow." Samantha nodded, her mood darkening. Every 3 months, Imperial officials came to ensure the colony followed their strict rules. No expansion beyond approved zones. No weapons beyond basic security. No communications with other species without Imperial approval. "Danny's class is scheduled for a tour of the power facility during the inspection," Paul said. "His teacher thinks it would be educational. I can cancel it if you want." "No," Samantha said after a moment. "We need to live normally, not hire our children every time the Empire visits." The next day, Imperial Officer Kreltor led the inspection team through the colony. Unlike most Galatians, whose skin had a white crystalline appearance, Kreltor's had a bluish tint that marked him as part of the Imperial Science Division. His silver eyes missed nothing as he scanned each room and hallway. "Your power efficiency has improved by 3.7% since our last visit," Kreltor noted as they walked through the main generator facility. "Impressive for such a young species." "Thank you," Paul replied stiffly. As chief engineer, he had to accompany the inspection team, though he hated every minute of it. A noise of excited voices made them turn. Danny's class entered the observation area above the main floor, their teacher pointing out different parts of the facility. The children pressed their faces against the glass, fascinated by the glowing reactor core. "Ah," Kreltor said, his voice suddenly interested. "Human offspring." He walked closer, studying the children with an intensity that made Paul uncomfortable. "That one," Kreltor pointed at Danny. "He appears different from the others." "That's my son," Paul said. "He was the first child born here." "Fascinating. His neural patterns must be uniquely adapted to non-Earth conditions." Kreltor made a note on his device. "We should study this development. It could be relevant to our understanding of human adaptive capabilities." "He's not a lab specimen," Paul said, unable to keep the edge from his voice. Kreltor turned, his silver eyes unblinking. "All developing species are subjects of study, Engineer Kelly. It is how we determine their proper place in the Empire." Later that evening, Paul told Samantha about the encounter. "I don't like how he looked at Danny," he said, like he was examining a bug under a microscope. Samantha touched her husband's hand. "The inspection is almost over. They'll be gone tomorrow." "And back in 3 months," Paul said. "Sometimes I wonder if we made the right choice, accepting their terms. What kind of future are we giving our son if he grows up being seen as less than them?" Samantha looked out the window at the stars. "The kind where humans reach those stars on our own terms, eventually. We just need time." What neither of them knew was that time was the one thing they didn't have. The next day would change everything, not just for their family, but for the entire relationship between humanity and the Galatian Empire. The next morning began like any other on New Haven. Danny ate breakfast with his parents before joining his classmates for the scheduled tour of the power facility. Samantha kissed her son goodbye, reminding him to stay with the group and listen to his teacher. "I know, Mom," Danny said with the impatience of a 10-year-old who thought he was already grown up. "Dad already showed me the important parts anyway." Paul ruffled his son's dark hair. "Just because you've seen it doesn't mean you know everything about it. Pay attention to Mr. Rivera. There might be a quiz later." Danny groaned but smiled as he ran to join his friends. It was the last time his parents would see him alive. The power facility tour began at 10:00 a.m., with Mr. Rivera leading 15 excited children through the observation level. The Galatian inspection team was scheduled to finish their work in a different section. But as the children reached the main reactor viewing area, Officer Krultor appeared with 2 other Galatian officials. "Continue your educational activity," Krultor told the surprised teacher. "We are merely observing." Mr. Rivera nodded nervously and continued explaining how the reactor converted energy to power the colony. The children paid more attention to the strange aliens than to his words. Danny, always curious, raised his hand with a question about why the reactor glowed blue. Before Mr. Rivera could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red emergency lights flashed along the corridors. "Warning. Energy surge detected. All personnel evacuate immediately," announced the automated system. Mr. Rivera gathered the children quickly. "Stay together. We're going to exit through the emergency doors, just like we practiced in drills." The children formed a line, some frightened, others excited by the sudden adventure. As they hurried toward the exit, the lights flickered and went out. Emergency lighting came on, casting everything in dim red shadows. In the confusion, no one noticed when Danny got separated from the group. No one except Krultor, whose silver eyes tracked the boy's movement down a wrong corridor. Later, security footage would show what happened next. While his classmates were led to safety, Danny found himself in a maintenance hallway. Looking scared, he tried to retrace his steps. Then Krultor appeared at the end of the corridor. Danny ran toward him, relief visible on his face. The Galatian official did not help the boy. Instead, he issued commands on his communication device. Heavy doors sealed the section where Danny stood trapped. The boy banged on the doors, his mouth open in what must have been cries for help. Krultor watched for 17 seconds, then turned and walked away. By the time the facility was secured and search teams could enter, it was too late. Danny's body was found near the sealed doors. Initial reports blamed radiation exposure from the surge. Paul identified his son's body while Samantha waited outside the medical facility, her face blank with shock. When Paul emerged, his eyes were red, his hands shaking. "There's something else," he said, his voice breaking. Dr. Brooks found something in his body. Some kind of device. It wasn't ours. 3 days later, Dr. Natalie Brooks showed the Kellys what she had found. A small metallic object, no bigger than a grain of rice, taken from Danny's brain tissue. "It's Gallatin technology," she said quietly. "Some kind of monitoring device, and based on the tissue growth around it. It's been there for months." Samantha stared at the tiny object that had been inside her son without her knowledge. "How? When did they put it there?" "His last checkup," Paul whispered. "Remember when the Empire insisted their medical officer be present? They did something to him then." When questioned, the Empire representatives expressed regret for the unfortunate accident, but claimed no knowledge of the device. The monitoring, they said, was standard practice for all new species, especially the first generation born in space. "Your son's death serves the advancement of scientific understanding," Krultor told the grieving parents. "The Empire acknowledges your sacrifice." Governor Kelly looked at the alien with cold eyes. She said nothing. But in that moment, something changed in her. Something that would soon change everything. Dr. Natalie Brooks could not sleep. For 2 weeks after Danny's death, she spent her nights in the medical lab of New Haven Colony, searching for answers. As chief medical officer and a friend of the Kelly family, she felt she owed them the truth. The tiny device she had found in Danny's brain sat in a sealed container on her desk. She had scanned it, analyzed its composition, and attempted to understand its function. But Galatian technology was far beyond human science. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Kevin Rodriguez, the colony's communications specialist, entered the lab. His usual smile was absent. "It's late, Natalie. You should rest," he said, placing a cup of coffee beside her. "I can't rest until I know why they did this," she replied, rubbing her tired eyes. "Have you had any luck with those transmissions?" Kevin had been secretly monitoring Galactian communications since Danny's death, risking severe punishment if caught. He nodded slowly. I broke through some of their encryption, he said in a low voice. You need to see this. He connected his tablet to Natalie's screen. Lines of strange symbols appeared, then transformed into English text. Most were routine communications between the inspection team and their command ship. But one message, sent by Officer Kreltor just before the energy surge, made Natalie's blood run cold. Subject 173H isolation proceeding as planned. Stress response monitoring active. Expecting valuable data on human child survival instincts and neural patterns under extreme conditions. Kevin scrolled to another message, sent after Danny's death. Experiment concluded successfully. Subject 173H terminated after showing typical human emotional response patterns. Data collected on pain threshold, fear response, and problem solving under duress. Recommends similar tests on other colony sites with control groups of varying ages. Natalie covered her mouth with her hand. They killed him on purpose. It wasn't an accident. There's more, Kevin said grimly. I found references to other tests across all human colonies, and not just on us. He pulled up another file. They'd been conducting these experiments on dozens of species for thousands of years. It's how they study new civilizations. Natalie stared at the evidence. We have to tell the Kellys. Everyone needs to know what really happened to Danny. The Empire would deny everything, Kevin warned. And Earth Command might suppress this to avoid conflict. They've made it clear they want peace at any cost. What peace? Natalie asked bitterly. They're treating us like lab rats. The next day, Natalie presented her findings to Governor Kelly in a private meeting. Samantha listened in silence, her face growing paler with each revelation. When Natalie finished, the governor remained quiet for a long moment. I've already sent this evidence to Earth, Natalie said. They need to know what the Galactians are doing. And what did they say? Samantha finally asked, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. They ordered me to destroy the evidence and keep quiet, Natalie admitted. They're afraid of provoking the Empire. The official response was that one child's death, however tragic, doesn't justify risking billions of lives in a war we can't win. Governor Kelly stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the colony continued its daily activities. People who didn't yet know that their children might be next. When Paul and I came here, she said quietly, we wanted to be part of humanity's future among the stars. We believed the sacrifice and risk were worth it. She turned to face Natalie, but no one asked Danny if he wanted to sacrifice his life for Galactian science. What will you do? Natalie asked. Earth wants silence. The Empire expects compliance. Samantha's eyes hardened. They'll get neither from me. If our own leaders won't protect our children, we'll have to do it ourselves. That sounds like treason, Natalie said carefully. No, Samantha replied. It sounds like being a mother. And I wasn't the only one who lost a child to their experiments. As Natalie left the governor's office, she realized Samantha Kelly had changed. The diplomat who had always followed rules and sought peaceful solutions was gone. In her place stood someone willing to fight an empire that had made the mistake of killing her son. 2 months after Danny's death, a new group formed in the quiet corners of New Haven Colony. They met in homes, workshops, and storage rooms away from the watchful eyes of the Galactian observers. They called themselves Danny's Legacy. Governor Samantha Kelly sat at the head of a table in Paul's engineering workshop. Around her were 20 colonists, parents who had lost children to strange accidents since the colony began. The pain in their eyes matched her own. We are not alone, she told them, her voice low but firm. Dr. Brooks has confirmed similar incidents at 3 other colonies. The pattern is always the same. A child gets isolated during some emergency, dies under unusual circumstances, and the Empire calls it an unfortunate accident. Hall stood beside his wife, his hands resting on a large paper map of the colony. They used paper because it couldn't be hacked or monitored. We need to be ready for their next inspection, he said. We know they're coming to collect more data from us. This time, we'll be prepared. On Earth, Dr. Natalie Brooks sat in a small cafe in Seattle, nervously checking her watch. The rain outside matched her mood. When the door opened, a tall man with gray hair and the straight posture of a military officer entered. He scanned the room before sitting across from her. "Dr. Brooks," he said simply, "I'm Admiral William Carter, retired. I got your message." Natalie slid a small data chip across the table. "Everything is here, the evidence of what they did to Danny Kelly and other children." Earth Command refused to act on it. The Admiral pocketed the chip without looking at it. "I'm not surprised. The official policy is appeasement at all costs." "Then why meet with me?" Natalie asked. Carter leaned forward. "Because some of us have never believed appeasement works with bullies, whether they're human or alien. There's a group within Earth's military and scientific community that's been planning for the day when the Empire shows its true colors." "What kind of planning?" "The kind that would be called treason if it became public," Carter said quietly. "For the past 5 years, we've been reverse engineering every piece of Galactian technology we could get our hands on, developing weapons and defenses they don't know about." Natalie's eyes widened. "How is that possible? Their technology is centuries ahead of ours." "Yes and no," Carter replied. "Their tech is more advanced, but it's also stagnant. They haven't faced a real challenge in thousands of years. They don't innovate anymore. They just apply the same solutions to everything." He pulled out a small device and placed it on the table. It created a faint humming sound that blocked any listening devices. "We've made breakthroughs they can't imagine," he continued. "But we need more time and resources. Your evidence might help convince certain people to increase our funding." "What people?" "People who control budgets but don't officially exist," Carter said with a slight smile. "The Empire thinks they know everything about us because they monitor our official channels. They have no idea what happens in the shadows." Back on New Haven, Samantha met with her most trusted ally beside Paul. Maya Diaz had lost her daughter Eva to a containment failure in the colony's hydroponic farm last year. Like Danny, Eva's body had contained a small monitoring device. "The resistance is growing," Maya reported. "Almost a third of the colony supports us now, but we still don't have weapons that can hurt their ships." "Weapons come later," Samantha said. "First, we need information. We need to know exactly how they think, how they plan. And we need to contact the other colonies without the Empire or Earth knowing." "Is that even possible?" Maya asked. Paul stepped forward, holding a small device he had built in secret. "The Empire monitors all official communication channels, but they don't monitor everything." He activated the device, and a hidden screen lit up with a message. "New Terra colony responding. We stand with Danny's legacy." Samantha nodded, determination in her eyes. "One colony at a time, we build our network. The Empire thinks we're just emotional, irrational creatures. They're about to learn that a mother's rage is the most rational force in the universe when her child is threatened." As night fell over New Haven, the first seeds of resistance began to grow across the stars. The Empire had ruled for thousands of years without challenge. They had never faced an enemy with nothing left to lose. 18 months passed. On Earth, the highest leaders gathered in a secure underground facility beneath the old United Nations building in New York. The room was silent as they read the message that had arrived 1 hour earlier from the Galatian Empire. President Linda Morris looked up from the document, her face pale. "They want to modify our children, genetically." Admiral Carter, now called out of retirement to serve as Earth's defense coordinator, nodded grimly. "The Empire has determined that humans are too emotional and unpredictable. They want to make us more suitable for their system." "And if we refuse?" asked General Frank Wells. "They don't offer that option," Carter replied. "The message is clear. A fleet is already on its way. We have 1 month before they arrive with their genetic specialists." President Morris stood up and walked to the window that showed the underground garden built to remind the leaders of what they were protecting. Can we fight them? All eyes turned to Carter. For a year and a half, he had directed the secret weapons program. Billions of dollars had flowed into research facilities hidden across Earth and its colonies. Ships had been built in asteroid bases far from prying eyes. We can, Carter said carefully. The quantum tunneling weapons are ready. They can penetrate their shields, at least based on what we know of Galactian technology. But, President Morris asked, hearing the hesitation in his voice, but we need to get close to their main fleet to deploy them effectively. And right now, all our ships would be detected and destroyed before they could get within range. The president turned to face the room. So we need a distraction, something to get their ships in position where we can hit them. On New Haven Colony, Governor Kelly received the same message from the Empire, but unlike Earth's leaders, she had been expecting it. The network of resistance cells across all human colonies had intercepted Galactian communications months earlier. She stood before the colony's full assembly in the main dome. Nearly 5,000 people listened as she read the Empire's demands. They believe we will comply out of fear, she concluded. They believe we value survival above freedom, above the natural development of our children. A murmur ran through the crowd. Earth has asked all colonies to prepare for these genetic specialists, Samantha continued. But I ask you, what kind of humans would we be if we allowed an alien empire to remake our children into something that suits them better? What can we do? Someone called out. Their ships are too powerful. Paul Kelly stepped forward to stand beside his wife. Not as powerful as they think, he said. For 18 months, we've been building something they don't expect. The next day, when Earth Command called an emergency meeting of all colonial governors, Samantha Kelly made an offer that shocked the assembled leaders. New Haven will appear to welcome the genetic specialists, she said to the holographic faces of Earth's leadership. When their ships enter our atmosphere, they'll lower their shields as they always do during landing procedures. That's when Earth's hidden fleet can strike. Admiral Carter studied her face. You're offering your colony as bait, Governor Kelly. The people there would be at extreme risk. My people voted unanimously, Samantha replied. We've already begun evacuating everyone except those who volunteer to stay. We know the risks. President Morris looked troubled. And if the plan fails, the Empire would destroy New Haven completely. They killed my son, Samantha said simply. They've killed children on every human colony. If we don't stop them now, they'll change our children into something that isn't human anymore. Some risks are worth taking. As the meeting ended, Admiral Carter asked for a private channel with Governor Kelly. The weapons are ready, he said when they were alone. But there's something you should know. If this works, if we actually hurt them, we'll be starting a war unlike anything humanity has ever faced. Samantha nodded. They started this war when they killed Danny. We're just making sure they know it. 3 days later, Earth's secret fleet gathered in the shadow of Jupiter's moon Europa, ready to launch. On board the lead ship, newly named Retribution, Admiral Carter reviewed the battle plans one final time. The Empire had ruled for millennia without serious challenge. In 3 weeks, that would change forever. The day arrived. 3 massive Galactian ships descended through the atmosphere of New Haven, their sleek forms casting long shadows over the colony. From the outside, everything appeared normal. Children played in the Central Park. Workers moved between buildings. The landing pad was prepared with a formal welcome party. But inside most of the buildings, there was no one. Of the colony's 5,000 residents, only 200 remained, all volunteers. The rest have been quietly evacuated to underground shelters in the mountains, far from the colony. Governor Kelly stood at the front of the welcome party, dressed in her formal uniform. Paul was beside her, along with Dr. Brooks, who had returned from Earth to join them. They watched as the lead ship touched down, and its main door slid open. High Emissary Zorvex stepped out, followed by a team of Galactians wearing white coats. Their crystalline skin caught the sunlight, sending rainbow reflections across the landing pad. "Governor Kelly," Zorvex said, his silver eyes showing no emotion. "Your cooperation honors the Empire. The genetic specialists will begin with your youngest population. The process is painless and will ensure your species' proper development." Samantha smiled politely. "We have prepared a welcome reception in the main hall. Would you care to address our people before the procedures begin?" The emissary nodded. "A wise suggestion. It will help calm any irrational fears." As they walked toward the colony's main hall, Dr. Brooks checked her hidden communicator. The signal was active. Throughout the colony, cameras were streaming everything to Earth's fleet and to colonies across human space. Everything the Galatians said and did would be recorded. In the main hall, 200 colonists waited. Many wore pictures of children who had died in accidents pinned to their clothes. The Galatians did not seem to notice as they took their places at the front of the room. High Emissary Zorvex stepped up to the speaking platform. "Citizens of New Haven, today marks your species' advancement toward galactic citizenship. The emotional instability that has marked human development will be corrected in your offspring, ensuring they grow to be productive members of the Empire." He gestured to the white-coated Galatians. "These specialists will modify specific genes in your reproductive cells and in your existing children. The changes will reduce fear responses, eliminate aggressive tendencies, and increase logical processing. These improvements are a gift from Emperor Thax Ulo the Magnificent." Governor Kelly stepped forward. "Before we proceed, Emissary, I believe our people would benefit from understanding exactly what you have learned about human emotions from your previous studies." Zorvex looked confused. "Previous studies?" Samantha nodded to Paul, who activated the large screen behind the stage. It displayed security footage from the day Danny died. The room watched in silence as Kreltor sealed the boy in the radiation zone and walked away. "This was not the only experiment," Samantha said, her voice steady. "We have documented 27 cases across human colonies where children were deliberately placed in fatal situations to study their responses." The colonists began to stand, each holding up pictures of dead children. For the first time, uncertainty showed in Zorvex's silver eyes. These isolated incidents were unfortunate, but necessary for scientific understanding. Your emotional response demonstrates exactly why modification is required. Samantha stepped closer to the emissary. "No, it demonstrates why you should have feared us from the beginning." She raised her hand, revealing a small device. When she pressed it, every screen in the colony activated at once, broadcasting to every Galatian ship in orbit and across their communication network. "This message is for the Galatian Empire," she said, looking directly at the cameras. "For years, you have experimented on our children. You have watched them die for your data. You have treated us as lesser beings." The screen showed images of each child who had died, along with the Galatian reports describing their deaths as experiments. "Today that ends," Samantha continued. "You killed our children. Now we have one word of advice for you." Her voice hardened. "Run." At that moment, Earth's hidden fleet emerged from stealth positions throughout the New Haven system. The Galatian ships in orbit, caught by surprise, had no time to raise their shields before the first quantum-tunneling weapons struck. On the Retribution, Admiral Carter watched as the carefully planned attack began. "For Danny," he whispered as he gave the order to fire. News of the battle at New Haven spread across the galaxy faster than the Empire could contain it. Governor Kelly's broadcast reached not only Galatian ships, but also planets of other species who lived under Imperial rule. For the first time in thousands of years, the Empire faced defeat in battle. More importantly, their secret experiments on lesser species were exposed for all to see. 3 months after the battle, Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as ships from a dozen different alien species joined the growing fleet. Species that had endured Imperial experiments for generations now rose up against their oppressors. "The Volari have sent 30 ships," his communications officer reported. "The Nezdek have sent 50. They all want to join what they're calling the Freedom Alliance. Carter nodded. The quantum weapons had proven even more effective than they had hoped. 6 Imperial warships had been destroyed at New Haven before the rest retreated. The Empire, which had not faced serious military defeat in millennia, was struggling to respond to attacks on multiple fronts. On New Haven, Governor Kelly had become the voice of the rebellion. Her message was broadcast daily to every corner of the galaxy. Each time, she showed images of children from different species who had died in Galatine experiments. They treated us all the same way, she said in her broadcasts. They took our children. They watched them die. And they called it science. Now we stand together to ensure no more children suffer at their hands. Earth's leaders were divided. Some wanted to push the advantage and destroy the Empire completely. Others feared that total victory would be impossible against a civilization so vast and ancient. President Morris called an emergency meeting with Admiral Carter, Governor Kelly, and representatives from the other species who had joined the fight. We have a chance to end this war before it consumes more lives, the president said. The Empire has requested peace talks. Peace on what terms? Asked Governor Kelly, who attended via hologram from New Haven. They're willing to grant humanity full independence, President Morris replied. No more observers, no more restrictions. Admiral Carter frowned. And what about the other species? What about justice for the children who died? The alien representatives growled their agreement. A tall, blue-skinned Volari spoke up. My species lost thousands of children to their experiments over centuries. Freedom for humans alone is not enough. Governor Kelly nodded. We didn't start this fight just for ourselves. If the Empire wants peace, they must change completely. 1 week later, aboard a neutral station at the edge of the solar system, High Emissary Zorvex met with the Alliance leaders. His once proud bearing was diminished. Behind him stood Emperor Thaxulo himself, forced to leave his palace for the first time in centuries to deal with the crisis. The Empire recognizes that mistakes were made, Zorvex said carefully. We offer reparations and full independence to humanity. Not good enough, Governor Kelly replied. She placed a document on the table between them. This is the new Galactic Charter. It guarantees rights for all sentient beings. It forbids experimentation without consent, and it requires the Empire to be governed by a council representing all species. Impossible, the Emperor declared, his crystalline face darkening with anger. The Empire has ruled alone for 20,000 years. Admiral Carter leaned forward. The Empire has a choice. Sign the charter, or face our combined fleets. Your technology isn't as superior as you thought. Our quantum weapons can reach your homeworld now. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then Zorvex looked at the Emperor and spoke quietly. The humans warned us to run. We did not listen. Perhaps now we should listen. 3 days of tense negotiations followed. Finally, High Emissary Zorvex signed the Galactic Charter while representatives from 27 species watched. The Empire would continue to exist, but no longer as the absolute power it once was. As the ceremony ended, Governor Kelly stood beside a holographic image of Danny. In every colony across human space, and on planets of their new allies, similar images of lost children were displayed. The price was too high, she whispered to her son's image. But today, we made sure it wasn't paid for nothing. Admiral Carter joined her, looking at the image of the boy whose death had changed the galaxy. Children will still be born, he said softly. But now they'll grow up in a different universe than the one that took Danny from us. For the first time since her son died, Samantha Kelly smiled. A universe where no empire decides who lives or dies, where no species plays God with another's children.